Well, I get to hang out with two of my favorite people today.
Did you turn that on?
Let me produce the podcast, Dan. Control issues already. Actually, check it. Make sure it's on real quick. Is it running?
Yeah.
All right, good. We're good.
Yes, it is.
Oh man, this is like you guys are like family to me, so this is fun. Jill's been begging to come back on the podcast because she just loves.
Wow, have I ever?
Yes.
Today we get to talk about everyone's favorite topic, process addictions. This, among other things, was absolutely brand new to me when I came to Valiant. Never even knew it existed in the universe. You guys, is it safe to say you I won't say you specialize in this, but would that be accurate?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that's fair.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and little backstory on, when Dan and I met, and Jill, you were our family therapist and had many late night conversations with Jamie in the grocery store while you guys, talking her through all the stuff, and we'll always be forever grateful for that. And when I met Dan for the first time, I don't know if you know this story, but when I came in, there was a lot of substance abuse guys at the time. And I'm coming in trying to figure out my stuff, and which a lot of co-addiction going on too, I come to find out. But Dan was working in housing at the time, and he was in there, and it was the first time, I get emotional even thinking about it, because it was the first time I talked to someone, I was like, that's my story. That's it. Like, we just we became brothers from that point on, because I was like, oh, he started talking about process addiction. I was like, yeah, that's me. And that was maybe a few days or a week into my experience here. But I was like, wow, I just found myself in that story. So this is a big part of what Valiant does, and kind of a little bit of our niche. I mean, obviously we treat all different kinds of addictions, but something that we specialize in, and largely thanks to the two of you. So thanks for being willing to sit down, and we'll see. This could go off the rails with the three of us. Who knows? We'll try to be on our best behavior.
It's pretty much. I think it's pretty much guaranteed to go off the rails. Yeah, we've got the script here of questions. I have a feeling we may do about two of them.
Stick to at all. Yeah. All right, let's start the basics here. Can you talk what exactly is process addictions? How do they differ from substance use disorders? If this is a new phrase or term for people, which I imagine it will be for many.
Yeah. So I don't know, like who goes first? So process addictions are like food, which is one of the things that we don't do here at Valiant. But then there's also like video games, internet, pornography, gambling, sex, right? So these are process addictions. So a process addiction is basically an addiction that a lot of people see as something as an unhealthy maybe habit or an unhealthy hobby that takes over, and then the dopamine that they're getting from doing that thing comes from their brain, instead of a substance addiction where the dopamine that they're getting from that habit or the thing that they're doing comes from the substance itself.
Yeah.
The way I like to also discuss it is the drug is between your ears. It's your brain, it's your thinking. In substance, obviously, there's literally a physical substance. In process addictions, it's something outside of that. It's something that starts mainly and perseverates in your head, in the thought process. Like Jill said, gambling, sex addiction with pornography. And I mean, there's physical things that you're doing, but it all is based in thought.
Is this newer stuff? Has this been around for a long time? Because I think a lot of people would hear some of the things that you just said and I think definitely with sex addiction, gambling are a few that are getting more popular in terms of needing treatment and actually being an addiction. But I'd imagine a lot of people for a lot of years didn't even view those things you mentioned as on the spectrum of addiction.
Well, yeah, I mean, sex addiction still hasn't made the DSM.
What's the DSM?
DSM is the what is the I can't even remember the.
It's our diagnostic
diagnostic
manual.
Gotcha.
And the S stands for something.
Yeah.
But it's but it's we're at the DSM-5 TR, which is the text revision. So there's been multiple versions of the DSM that the diagnostics have been created. Well, they still don't recognize sex addiction as
Interesting.
as an addiction.
And is that like the standard for addictions? Like,
Yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of like our Bible.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
If it and then that gets based then out of insurance then too.
Oh,
is if it's not diagnosed in the DSM, or if there's not a diagnosis in the DSM, then the insurance company isn't going to kick in
Interesting.
to treat it. Hence the reason our guys here have to
Yeah.
we have to look at other
options.
is there other comorbidity? Is there mental health? Is there addiction to alcohol? Substance uses? Is there other pieces
Right.
that we can also be treating while
And
we're
there
doing
always
this?
is. There
And
always is.
Always,
Addiction
right?
interactions,
Always is,
real.
yes,
Yeah. So there's
yeah.
always an addiction interaction or a comorbidity
Yes.
that goes along with that,
Can
right?
you
So-
explain addiction interaction for people that may not be familiar with that?
Yeah, it's where maybe we start with one addiction, then we add another. That's what actual addiction interaction is. Or we have mental health issues, and then with those we start looping in other negative ways to cope. So maybe we're depressed and we start drinking, or maybe we're anxious and we start drinking, and then those things escalate into other things, right? So if escalation looks like a whole bunch of different things, right? So chasing the dragon. So if it's alcohol, maybe it starts with beer and then it goes to hard alcohol and then it's more. And then maybe we start drugs and then we try different kinds of drugs and then it goes to more. So we're always trying to chase like that one way we felt when we very first started using. The same is with porn, right? Like we start watching, really basic vanilla type porn, and then it like escalates into more risque porn or different types of porn.
Because you're going after that
Initial
dopamine,
feeling, that
right?
dopamine
So you kind of
hit.
numb out to that stuff, and it just
Yep.
progressively gets
Yeah.
deeper and deeper.
Another piece with addiction interaction is, let's say a person comes off of substances, some sort of substance, and then all of a sudden they start getting a shopping addiction or a pornography addiction, or maybe they were on a substance but now they start drinking alcohol to a great degree. That can be replacement. You can be simply replacing that original addiction as well.
Yeah,
Well,
so we could do cross addiction versus that replacement. There's all sorts of different ways that it happens.
And
There's 11 different categories of addiction interaction.
Well, because that was mine. Is I started drinking to cope with my primary, like just to numb out from that. So that was why when I came in, that was a problem for me, for sure. It's interesting that what you're saying. So, what are the ones? Well, before I get to that, what I love about what you guys do here is you go below the surface of all those addictions. And it's why there's guys that could come in from a lot of different backgrounds and really a lot of different unhealthy copes and addictions and find a lot of commonality, because even though like our escapes might be a little bit different, the things that drive us to them, like you mentioned, anxiety and stress, depression, or whatever they are, tend to be a lot the same, right? I mean, is that what
Right.
you guys
Yeah.
see that a lot, right? You come in and like
Very-
guys don't
yeah.
connect, and then at the end
Yeah.
of it, they're like, wow.
Yeah, very much. I mean, it's the way we look at it also is it's not about the what.
Yeah, we already know what the what
We
is.
know what the what is. The what is the substance. The what is the sex addiction. The what is gambling. We know what the what is. We're going to dig into the why. Why is this a problem for
Yeah.
you in your life?
Yeah.
What is it that happened in your childhood, in your adulthood, in your, just in your life in general, that has created this unhealthy manner of dealing with stress, anxiety, depression? What is at the bottom of
Yeah.
that?
So what are the ones that we specifically deal with here? You mentioned we don't do food, which,
That's a tricky one. You want to be in a
That's,
medical facility for that, for
oh,
sure.
really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's a hard one to treat.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because you have to eat, right? Or is that why?
It's a reintroduction to eating. Yeah, you have to do it safely. There's a lot of risks involved in that, for sure.
Is it true that a lot of people, when they go, and I heard this when I was here, when they go, if they have to go back to treatment or rehab, a lot of times it's for something else than the primary thing they went for, because it's almost like they
Yeah. Yeah.
handle that one issue, but if they don't get to the why, like what you guys do with us here,
Yeah, then
it's
we're
just
gonna
going to show
we're
up somewhere
swapping.
else.
They're just gonna- yeah.
we're
Yeah.
gonna just swap,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was in treatment, there was a gentleman that I was in treatment with that this was his third treatment facility.
Mm-hmm.
He went for alcohol the first time. He went for substance, cocaine the second time,
Mm-hmm.
and then he went for intimacy disorder and the sex addiction at the third one. And he finally figured out his why.
Well, we joked about it too because not joked, but you gotta have a sense of humor a little bit. But the guys that I was here with that were here for substance, they were all guys too.
They were all
Right, that's what I was going to say. And if we're going to be honest, we're all dabbling, right? So if we're here for something, we're dabbling in a little bit of everything. And if we're looking at any addiction, every addiction's an intimacy disorder, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah, I've heard you say it before, and I
Yes.
love that because it helps reframe. Because I feel like there's just so much stigma still around addiction, this idea, and I've heard more people teach lately that everyone is in this camp on that spectrum at some point. I don't know if you guys believe that or not, but everyone has these addictive tendencies. And when you talk intimacy disorder, that specifically really helps me relate to like, oh yeah, I've got it. It's really a connection issue.
it really is. That's all it is. It's like a
yes.
huge
Yes.
connection issue.
Right.
So I gave up the connection with the people that I love the most, the things that I enjoy the most, work, friends, right? All those things, my family, for whatever my drug of choice was, whether it was a process addiction or a substance use issue. I gave up all the things that were the most important to me to that one thing or multiple things, because sometimes it's many.
That becomes your mistress. That becomes the most important thing to you. It no longer becomes, at some point in time, it no longer becomes a want. It becomes a need for your body. It becomes a need. And so everything else takes a back seat.
Yeah.
Everybody else takes a back seat to that addiction. And it just creates this boundary, this wall of, because if I'm showing everybody around me that I have these issues, then they're going to judge me. They're going to think lesser of me, and so I'm just going to pull back. I'm going to hide. I'm going to go isolate, because my addiction isn't going to allow me to. My addiction isn't going to judge me. It's not going to be mad at me. It's not going to yell at me. It's not going to treat me poorly. It's going to love me.
Right.
And so with that thinking, of course we're going to back off from those around us, because it is telling us those people are going to hurt you.
Right.
I'm not. And when you have that talk in your head, of course you're going to. Of course you're going to. And so when you back off, it wants you. Your addiction wants you alone.
Yeah.
It wants you by itself. It wants to be your one and only.
Wants you
and
isolated,
it wants you isolated.
Yeah.
And when it does that,
Right.
it wins.
Right.
It wins.
So
Yeah, then
good.
it starts telling you things like,
Yeah.
if anybody really knew you, they wouldn't love you.
Yep.
Yep.
If anybody could see what you're doing, they
Yeah.
would pass judgment, right? Exactly what you're saying, Dan. Like,
So you hide, right?
Hide, yeah.
Until you can't hide anymore.
Yeah.
'Cause
Right.
eventually it's going to
Eventually.
catch up
Yeah.
and you're going to implode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I say you, I mean me.
Yeah.
You know?
and
hey,
me.
your family already
Yeah.
knows,
Right,
right?
right,
That's what I
yeah.
tell you guys all
Yeah.
the time. Like,
Yeah.
your family already knows. You think you're sneaky and you think that you're holding a secret, but they see it.
Well, and it's really a miserable way of living too, because once you and I want this for my friends who are in recovery or my friends who are addicts, where it's like once you experience the freedom of being fully honest and fully known, fully loved, like you said, you're almost ruined to go back. And the disease is strong, right? And we still get called into isolating all those things, but you feel it. Like you feel it when there's that disconnect. You're like, man, and we need to do a whole episode. We've talked about doing this on disclosure because, man, that is a brutal process, but man, such a beautiful thing when it's done therapeutically and
Absolutely.
done right, where it's like you give yourself really the gift of being like, wow, okay, whoever I have to do the disclosure with, they have all the cards now.
Yeah.
And you get to the point in your treatment here, at least I did, where even if that has a quote unquote negative outcome, you still want it because the idea of being free and being honest is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Jill would always tell us in sessions, you would always say, hey, no matter what happens, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
You're going to be fine.
Yeah.
He's going to get through it. And it's like, okay, this is really hard right now, but it's going to be okay. And man, that is like the best feeling in the world, to have that kind of freedom and that kind of honesty.
Yeah, to not be harboring secret
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Oh
You're
my
not
gosh.
holding it in your pocket anymore. Like
Yeah.
everything's just out.
It's just out, yes. And the way I look at it now too is my worst day in recovery is better than any of my best days in addiction.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's just so much more freeing, being honest, being open, not having to worry about, what lie did I tell to this person? What exaggeration or what, it's a juggling match that
how y'all
you're
get
going to
caught.
lose. You're
How
going to
y'all get
lose
caught.
every freaking time. You're going to lose it every time.
Yeah.
Who did I tell what to and when and
Yeah,
why?
yeah.
Well, and I don't know
gosh.
if you felt this way or not, but I still, and less now than early on, but I still was carrying, I almost had to remind myself that I didn't have anything to hide.
Yeah.
I was so used to living
Yeah.
in a way of like, and even in just what I would say like smaller things, but it still was manipulative. But it was like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, there's nothing to hide. But I still almost had that. I was just used to that way of living.
Yeah, that guilty feeling.
The guilty feeling
Yeah.
of like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not hiding.
I'm not. Yeah. I'm being honest. I'm being open. I'm being vulnerable. I'm not lying by omission. I'm not just truly lying. I'm being honest and reminding ourselves of that gratitude for being that way.
Yeah.
Is so important and we have to give ourselves that grace of remembering, okay, yeah, I'm living life differently now than I did before.
So here we treat sex addiction, gambling addiction. Are those the two main ones for process addiction that we treat, or are there others?
No, we do shopping. So
Video games.
video games.
Well, that mic is a little bit closer. I want to hear your,
Oh, sorry.
your beautiful voice.
Oh yeah, the chipmunk voice. So we do shopping, gambling, sex. So shopping, gambling, sex, work.
About the only process addiction we don't do is the food, is the eating. And like Jill said, that one just needs to be so medically supervised. But we can pretty much handle any of the other, because the interesting thing, between gambling and sex and all the process addictions are there's so much interconnectedness.
I was going to ask, are there similar ways of treating?
Yeah.
Internet.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's another
Yes.
addiction.
Yeah.
My brain shut off for a second. I'm like, wait, what am I forgetting?
Yeah.
We never think of like how this is the phone is such a thing, right? So we take it away from you guys, and so many people.
Oh,
Well,
lose their minds.
That's our biggest fight with the guys once they've joined the program. That's our biggest fight when it comes to. It's not how much they're meeting with their therapist. It's not how much they're getting outside meetings. It's when can I get my damn phone? And that in itself, we like look at them then and be like, you sure you need your phone at this point?
Well, and once you detox from it, when you finally do get it back, you're kind of like, oh man, you
That's
get
one
it,
of
and
the
you're
things
like,
too that we
I-
witnessed
yeah,
too. Like
I-
a lot of guys are like, yeah, no, I don't want it back.
Yeah, I had a guy that I kept it from for 28 days, and he came back to me then later and said, that was the best thing you could have done for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't need it like I did before. It's there. I use it as I need to, but it's not attached to me 24/7 now like it was.
It's like, it feels like a I was going to say medicine, but not in a good way. But it's like, for me, the anxiety, my brain is always going, like always going. It wasn't until I got here that I've described it, where it felt like at the soul level, like an engine that was revving, that just like went and just like calmed down. And I remember talking to Dr. Martin and being like, hey, I think that something's wrong with me.
No, we've been wanting to do an intervention on you for your ADHD anyway.
She was
so.
like, because I'm like, because my brain, like, I was so used to my brain just going, that when it stopped doing that, it freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah.
I thought I was, having an episode of some sort.
I mean, you
But
are.
I think the phone and work and all these other things, if we don't use the practices that we're taught here and the tools we're giving here, whether it's meditation or going outside or what other, I'll use those still, work, phone, whatever, to quiet my brain for a second by filling it with other things. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm like, what do you mean you don't have a theme song in your head all the time?
Yeah.
You don't hear things like in your brain,
Right.
like music, like constantly going. You don't have a theme song? No, but I totally get it.
And
So
I legitimately think my wife doesn't.
she probably doesn't. No, she doesn't.
Because we've talked about this recently where it's been like, hey, do you not? And she's like, no, I don't.
Like, you
she's-
mean you could just lay down and go to sleep?
Yeah,
What is that?
Yeah, it's not a constant, like I wake up to my thoughts already going full speed.
Yeah.
So do Dan and I. We talk about it all the
Yes.
time.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
I feel less alone
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
But,
no, it's
Yeah.
totally fine. You work with a whole bunch of ADDers. Like, it's,
Yeah.
it's good to go.
but that's why we have to have those the healthy coping tools and mechanisms. Because if not, those are all the process addictions for me are the things
Yes.
I will go to quiet my brain and
Yeah.
to get a moment of peace.
Well, addiction is preys on the attention deficit
Oh, really?
person. Yeah. You look at a lot of addiction, and it comes out of ADHD and those types of
I didn't realize that. It
disorders.
makes sense.
Yeah, because they want a way to numb. You know, especially early on for kids with you'll hear a lot of kids that are ADHD that will, you know, they immediately go to alcohol or weed, and they say, "Oh my God, it actually I can think.
Help me calm,
I can
yeah.
calm. Whoa."
It's
You
so
know,
wrapped up in depression, too.
Yeah.
There's so much depression tied to it because you just can't focus and you can't get stuff done. So you feel like you're a failure. When that's not it at all, right? Like, it just, like, if your brain's constantly going and you can't just stop. That's completely off topic, by the way. But
No,
I love
it's
it.
not.
Yeah,
It's
we've
great.
totally we
This is great. No, I'm learning.
totally
So-
went to a squirrel moment.
You're welcome.
There we go. Well, intimacy disorder and process addiction.
Way to bring us back.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking, how are those two connected specifically, and how is it different than with substance?
So in intimacy disorder, you know, like we said, every addiction, our belief is that every addiction has intimacy disorder in it.
Okay.
And so you're going to not communicate with your spouse or friends, or you're going to be hiding things. All of those things create a lack of intimacy. So when you're creating a lack of intimacy, what then also happens is your spouse now is wondering, what's wrong with me?
Interesting.
Okay, and when your spouse starts wondering what's wrong with me because they see you pulling back, now they're going to be like, there's something wrong with me, so they pull back. And so now neither one of you are communicating in a healthy manner. You're both hiding things. You're both because the spouse is afraid to rock the boat because, let's say, the addict has gets upset or shuts down or runs off anytime the spouse brings something up. Because we'll hear a lot of guys that will say, "Well, yeah, I used to create fights with my spouse to give me reason to walk away, to leave, to go act out.
I don't have to deal with the real reason. So
Yes,
there's an actual.
yes. So they would create a situation, create a argument, create this so that they could go and use or act out, where that in and of itself would be an intimacy disorder area, because here I am sabotaging my connection with my spouse.
So it sounds like you've got two people, and sometimes more, and it's why you guys work a lot with family systems that are just in this exhausting game of trying to manage one another.
Yes.
When no one's really being honest with how they feel or how they're being impacted by whatever. They're just trying to manage.
So everybody, the rest of the house is probably walking around on eggshells because of the addict, and they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to talk about the elephant in the room.
Right.
And it's usually not just one elephant. There's usually about 16 elephants in the room, because it's just multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. And so when there's no communication about anything, or just surface level, "Oh, I like your shirt today."
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the addict feels like, "Oh yeah, we're communicating really well." No, you're not.
Right.
It's surface level stuff.
Right.
She spoke to me.
Yeah. She spoke to me. She didn't scream at me.
Right.
It was amazing.
We're connecting. Yeah.
Yes,
We're talking. Everything's great.
Everything's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, exactly. When deep down she is feeling like crap and so abandoned and so much not engaged, and there's no intimacy. And we always remind the guys also, when we talk about intimacy, it very rarely is sexual intimacy. When we're talking intimacy, we're talking about the true into me you see. If you can see into me, then I'm, as an addict, that scares me to death.
For sure.
But
That
I can
scares me to
guarantee
death.
Scary.
if you go downstairs and ask these men, especially our new guys, what intimacy means,
They're going to say sex.
absolutely.
They're going to say sex every
Absolutely.
time.
Right.
And to me, intimacy is maybe 25% of the pie. Maybe.
It's almost like the byproduct of true connection.
Well,
or
yes,
something.
yes, it is, because you think with women, that's the connection. They want that connection. They need that connection in order to be, physically attracted to their spouse. Where men, it's we're animals, grunting and all that kind of stuff, But the fact of it is, we're doing the exact opposite of what our spouse wants and needs in an intimate relationship. They want to see into us, that into me you see.
Yeah.
And if we've got that wall built up, they're going to separate. They're going to push away also, because they're going to start thinking, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
It's about me.
Yeah. What are some of the key differences between substance and process, and then even like how you would treat that therapeutically?
There really isn't. If I'm looking at my process addiction guys and my substance use guys, addiction's addiction. So we're actually trying to figure out the why. So once we figure out what the why is, then we need to figure out how to work on like healthy coping mechanisms, how to work on whatever that trauma is, how to get past that, how to work through communication, how to build on reconnection, how to find intimacy in the room, right, with your peers, how to make new friends, how to make new habits. So really what we're looking at is like how to rebuild from what was shattered, right? So we're just rebuilding is what we're doing. The foundation's there, so now we just have to we have to put things back together.
Right.
When I'm looking at addiction, there's really not a difference between the two, process and substance. There is in a sense of course, like one is a substance and one is like in your head. You're using your own head and your own thought process to do it. I guess the main difference between the two would be you can't put a plug in a jug for process addiction. Some of them you can. Gambling you can. You could put a plug in the jug for gambling for sure. For sex you can't. You can for internet. You can for you can't really for shopping either.
Really
Get to buy
shopping,
groceries,
yeah.
but you can't for food. Right? There are some things you just can't.
That,
put a
I feel
plug
like
in
that's
a jug.
part of the challenge with some of those is like redefining the relationship. Because like you said,
Yes.
like with heroin, there's no like heroin in moderation.
No.
It's like
No.
you just, but with some of these, not all of them, but that's the hard part is
We are sexual object.
We
Or,
definitely
we
are.
are sexual
So
beings.
that portion of it, you're having to learn how to rebuild and have new connection and healthy connection and healthy relationships. But that goes for every addiction again. So like, what is the difference? You have to learn how to have a healthy sexual relationship. That would be one of the main differences. You have to have a healthy relationship with food, like if you're having an eating disorder. So those rebuilding blocks are different than it is for the other disorders.
About the biggest difference I see between the two of them is it's looked at as substance abuse. You're typically trying to numb feelings. Okay. process addiction, sex addiction especially, you're trying to feel feelings. You're trying to feel. Okay.
Interesting.
But really, other than that, it's the same neural pathways, the same dopamine releases, the same endorphins and adrenaline, and all of that is the same. So really, there's only that one difference in my mind.
Well, and a lot of if anybody's ever watched any movies or TV shows, people are familiar with withdrawal, like from substance. Like, okay, I'm having drug withdrawal, whatever. Is there such a thing as withdrawal from a process addiction as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, to pulling all the dopamine away. So we're going to hit anhedonia and like hit rock bottom and feel like, is this it? We have to get the brain back on track, right? So we're taking everything away.
Is it similar to like a substance withdrawal, or is it different, or it depends on the person?
I think it's similar in certain ways, right?
Yeah.
Like some substances are harder.
Right.
But when you're creating that yourself, it's longer to like rebuild it back up, right? Because we created that in our head ourselves, right? Like with some chemicals, it's easier because you're just taking it away, and now we have to figure out how
once
to
the chemicals out or detox from, then you can start
really build it back up. But when it's your own brain, like we're trying to figure out like how to get it all back going again. We're rewiring like for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So it's trying to get everything back on board, right? Like you think to yourself like, what's not talking to what on which side of the brain, right? That's why you see the psychiatrist and try to get on the right regimen for like sleep, and the right regimen for if you're going to take an SSRI, or like figuring out like if the why to your what is because maybe you have like some kind of mental health thing like bipolar or something like that. Like, are we on the right meds? So those kind of things are super important. So that's another thing that we look at when you're here, is making sure that you're medicated, which you probably weren't taking care of at all. So even if you were medicated at some point in your life, in your active addiction, all that kind of went out the window. Yeah. So it's trying to get back on track with that stuff.
Well, and one reason why, I'm a huge advocate for people going to treatment is also just having the safe space away from whatever their addiction of choice is. Because as you're talking, I'm just remembering how long it took for me to actually feel like my brain was like I was thinking straight again.
Well, Patrick Carnes has done some work on that, and he says it's somewhere, depending on the person, it's person driven, but it's between 75 and 120 days, depending on the person, to get them back to just a baseline, not even rewiring new neural pathways, but just to get them back to a normal baseline. So you figure kind of on an average 90 days, and that's just to get back to,
just so you can start doing the work again.
Yeah.
Well, that's why a lot of us alumni guys we're working on doing some of this kind of stuff. Like, there's a lot of us that want to come back, not for 90, but come back for a week or 10-day intensive. I probably listen. I could use it.
Yeah.
I think there's quite a few of you.
I think a lot of you guys could
you
use
up for 30.
Well, and if I'm being candid, if it wasn't for like family and responsibilities, I would absolutely, in a healthier space, come back and do it again.
Yeah.
I would hang out with all of you for like
just
30 days for sure.
Yeah.
Well, because so much of it, you're just fighting to survive, and you're fighting to forget. So it's like, and the therapy is great, but I just think it would be so much different when you're not coming out of active addiction.
Oh yeah.
I would love for us to create a program, like a week-long program, and I know
like a refresher.
Melissa and I have tossed that around, and I know Jill and I have talked about that, and Deneen, and we've all kind of tossed that around. It's just a matter of we just gotta
our lives are so unstable coming out because you're going back to whatever is waiting for you outside of here, which in a lot of cases is you just made a total mess of things. And so you're going back, and then once things stabilize again, whether that's what you hope for or not, either way, whether it's stabilizing again, it's almost like that's the time to re-engage. Like, okay, I'm not as dysregulated. I'm in a stable place, but we definitely need to work towards that because what you're saying, the brain is just not ready in a lot of ways to a lot of what we do here is just providing a safe place for guys to get away from.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of what we're doing also is I like to look at it as we're getting that snowball rolling down the hill. We're trying to gain some momentum because let's face, like I said, in 90 days, and some of our guys aren't able to do 90 days. Some of them are only able to do 30. But if we can get that ball rolling down the hill, we can get some good momentum created there, and they have a strong aftercare program back at their where they do live, with therapy, psychiatry, couples work, even an IOP or, intense outpatient program, something.
Yeah.
12
step,
steps, all of the pieces, if we can get that set up and created, and the spouse is bought in and the family is bought in. I mean, I sing your and Jamie's praises all the time with my guys that you and Jamie are kind of that poster child, that poster for what it looks like for a family to rebuild, because Jamie did such amazing work.
That's the key.
I use her all the time as an example with when I talk to the spouses, and you obviously did the work, kicking and screaming sometimes, but you did the work.
So many times.
Okay.
I'm like, no, you can't have your phone back. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take it away for longer.
Poor Jen.
Yeah.
Sweet Jen.
Yeah.
She's like, can you talk to him? He's going to be mad.
Yeah, he's going to be
I'm
mad.
like, yeah, I'll talk to him.
Yeah. Just tell him to sit the hell down. But it really has to be, we're not going to quote unquote heal anybody in 90 days.
Right.
We can get the process going.
It's like you're getting to the starting line in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, it's really taking that first step in a marathon. In order to complete that marathon, we always have to take that first step. And I know you can probably tell I've ran a lot of marathons in my life.
Subject you're really
even
familiar
make
with.
it up the hill.
I couldn't even
on
make
the
it up a
high.
freaking hill at one of our
fun of him
outings.
for that forever.
So, but anyway, it really truly is taking that first step of the marathon, because this is not a sprint.
Yeah.
Recovery is not a sprint.
Yeah.
It truly is a lifelong marathon from the first day you walk into Valiant, and in order to be successful there, you have to have the things around you, whether it's a substance or a process addiction or whatever. You just have to have the support around you to be able to be successful in your recovery.
Yeah, well, recovery is not an event; it's a process, right?
Yep.
So it's a lifelong process. It's not just a one and done, right? You have to keep at it. What do they say? You have to do the work. You got to work it to work it.
Yeah.
Or what is it?
Yeah.
How does it go?
It works if you work it.
It only works if you
It
work
only
it.
works if you work it.
Yep, I'm done.
Well,
Okay, this is where I'm walking out. Thank you.
well, it's process versus perfection. Process over perfection. Because we're not going to be perfect in our recovery. We can strive to be perfect in our recovery, but it's not going to happen.
Well, what I love about the alumni calls with the guys on Tuesday is I get more encouraged when I'm experiencing walking with these guys through really tough stuff.
Yes.
And they're choosing not to use or go to unhealthy coping, because it's like when you said it'd be a process, it's not about like, okay, I'm going to be in recovery now, life is just going to be great and up and to the right and everything else like that. A lot of these guys are going through some of the hardest things they've ever experienced health-wise or with their family or whatever else, but they're showing up every week and saying, thankfully, I'm not using and I'm okay, and I'm and they're still feeling like these guys will shed tears, and it's a welcome place. I always tell them their tears are welcome. It's like it's a welcome place to be emotional, and that is redefining manhood and being like, okay, I feel super sad, or I'm really angry, or I've got a lot of shame. And what's also true is I don't have to I can just sit in that and feel it. And I don't have to fix it. Like none of the guys try to fix one another. They just like, man, thanks for sharing. I feel less alone because of that. I feel the same way. Like, and then you're like, oh, and then you leave that. It could be just an hour Zoom call, and you leave so fired up. Like, oh, wait a minute, I can actually deal with what life throws at me.
Yeah. And it really boils down to being able to connect with those guys, being able to connect with each other, and One of the things I look at our guys all the time and I tell them is, you're the strongest men I know.
That's true.
You are the strongest men I know. The strongest men I know ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
The weakest men I know want to do it on themselves, do it by themselves.
Yeah.
And then struggle and struggle and struggle. And here you are, you've asked for help.
Mm-hmm.
That is really, truly showing what being a man means.
Yeah.
There's, I know it's kind of a political comment, but toxic masculinity has gotten a bad rap. Mm-hmm. Well, I look at it as, if we're not, whatever is bad for us individually, that's toxic,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
And if we as men were taught that there's two emotions, you can be happy or you can be angry. Mm-hmm. Well, I've seen a feelings wheel in Jill's office, in my office, and all of our offices. There's a heck of a lot more feelings on there than happy and angry.
Right.
And we as men were not taught those other ones. We were told that they're not okay. How many of us remember being told, or heard the term, "I'll give you something to cry about"?
Mm-hmm. Shake it off.
Shake it off. Mm-hmm. Quit being a
mm-hmm. Fill in the blank.
Fill
whatever,
in the blank. Yeah. Typically a female body part.
Right.
That that's toxic.
Yeah.
That's toxic, because not only are we being told not to be like the other gender, mm-hmm. but it's also telling us your feelings are wrong. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And whenever you're telling somebody their feelings are wrong, wait a second.
Yeah.
We got to check ourselves.
Right. Well, it sends us back into that spiral again.
We got to check ourselves as men. That if that's not okay to feel feelings, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, on that note, I mean, what role do you guys think that shame plays specifically in process addictions and intimacy disorder, and is that a thing you guys are dealing with a lot with these guys?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Shame spirals and.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of those. So you're looking at the marriages mm-hmm. that these men have recognized that they're ruining. Maybe they've ruined their lives financially. Maybe they've not been able to hold down a job. What has this done to their family? How has it impacted their kids? The shame spirals they're deep, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. We see them go pretty deep. And then, at the same time, in the same breath, there's a lot of that like denial, mm-hmm. That difficulty recognizing like why their family would mm-hmm. even think, any of this about them.
Right.
Why their wife is so angry, why they just don't understand.
Yeah.
That I said this before, like when, and Dan touched on it, like if it's an intimacy disorder and we're dealing with, porn, or we're dealing with acting out, and we're dealing with, breaking the skin barrier, the wife of that person, and they find out about it, they're asking themselves, like, what's wrong with mm-hmm. me? Like, what did I do? What didn't I do? What couldn't I give you? They're always questioning themselves. They're in, like their ability to care for their spouse. Mm-hmm. So it kind of puts them in their very own shame spiral because they're not understanding.
Right.
So it's trying to get them to recognize what the difference is between, the addiction portion of this mm-hmm. and that there's nothing wrong with them, and that their husband there's nothing wrong with them. Their husband doesn't see it that way. That's hard.
Right.
That's so hard for a woman to recognize that.
I can't imagine how much that would mess with someone's mind.
Oh, it's awful, right? So they don't see that, mm-hmm. right? Even if their husband says, like, this has nothing to do with you. I didn't do this because of you. Like, I think you're wonderful. I love you. You're beautiful.
Right.
Like I am in love with you. I want this to work. Mm-hmm. And the wife loves them too. It's still very hard for them to wrap their head around that. That's why so much work needs to be done. Mm-hmm. And there's so much education. Like in my group, we talk about it. We're trying to understand, like, what is addiction? Yes. Like, what can we look at their past? So we talk a lot about, like, what was your husband's trauma growing up? Can you recognize kind of mm-hmm. about what that looked like for them? And can you see patterns that? And did you recognize them? Yeah. What were your aha moments?
Well, I think even the education happens sometimes way before the emotions follow. And I know that was true. You mentioned Jamie earlier, and I couldn't agree more as far as her willingness to educate herself around the disease model of addiction, like all that stuff. Like it was like she read all this stuff, and I know she wasn't feeling it yet, and maybe even not thinking, but at least she was, learning all the stuff. And so it was it was actually really helpful, I think she would say, in her journey to kind of dive into the education part of it, even. And then it was like some of the other things caught up a little bit later, but at least she was like, oh, okay, there's a why behind this bigger than what I realized.
Yeah, we throw the education at them as soon as we can. Then we try to get them in therapy. This is the significant other, of course. If they don't already have a therapist, we try to rope them into therapy. We try to do the same with the kiddos. Like if there's children, we try to get everybody in. You try to get everybody wrapped up in services. That way, we can try to get as much care and like that, just those wraparound services as we can possibly get to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because it's a difficult thing, especially when we're dealing with shame. With shame comes, with shame comes anger, because it's fear, right?
Yeah.
So now I have an angry wife and I have an angry husband, and that anger is just fear, and that they're not understanding, right? So I have a wife who doesn't understand, a husband who doesn't understand. That's why we cut communication. And the same goes with gambling. We see that a lot in this gambling part of this. It's because now we're doing finances. So we have a whole bunch of shame, which then turns into fear, because that's anger. Like, what have you done? So we're trying to, again, wrap up those services, and we take away the technology. And then even after a while, when they start getting access to their technology again, it doesn't matter what the process addiction is. Even for our SUD guys, we put, monitoring on their phone. I watch it a lot. So does case management. So I can see where they're at. Everybody still gets their backtrack. So it doesn't matter if you're here for substance, or if you're here for, gambling, or if you're here for intimacy. A lot of these guys, even with those, still have, some kind of a cross addiction, right? So we're monitoring what they're doing. We can see what they're doing. We're getting in GAMFIN to help with finances and stuff for our gambling guys. And then, we lock everything down on the phone, even when they get it back. You like YouTube? You're probably not going to get it. Social media, that's a no for me.
Nope.
So I have everything locked down, and that's just how this works. The wives like that. The guys don't.
Well, it helps build trust.
It really does.
It helps with the fear and all that stuff.
And that's how we talk, right?
Yep.
I ask you guys, do you want this to work? Let's really work on making this work. If this is really what you want, then you're gonna have to give a little bit to get, right? And let's be honest, you did this.
Right.
So help me help you.
My kids hate Custodio. I put on their phones. We all have them on our phones still, and they're like, "Dad, I don't need more screen time." But nope.
I'm like, here is your 30 minutes of YouTube for the day.
I know, and I'm the softie that always extends the time, and I know I shouldn't, but.
And then I have blocks on it. I'm like, here's your 30 minutes, nothing over PG-13. And then it's like, Jill, YouTube alert. And I'm like, yep, I thought so. And they're like, I can't open anything up. I'm like, I know, it's so hard. I'm so sorry.
I think it's just funny how Sex Addicts Anonymous and Sexaholics Anonymous, and they can't get on those websites, and we have to be like, oh yeah, we have to unlock those.
They're looking for a meeting.
They're looking for a meeting.
Mature
content.
Because they typed in the word sex.
Because they text in sex.
Yep, I remember that. They're just trying to find a meeting.
Yeah, just trying to find a meeting. Okay, yeah.
We have a client right
need to
now
unlock that.
who's in school for nursing, and I get alerts constantly because he's researching stuff for school.
Yeah.
And it's like, so-and-so looked up this. And I'm like, where? Oh, it's ligaments. I'm like, I got it. Or anatomy.
JR
and I'm
hey, JR, can you unlock this certain thing? It was he probably got exhausted. Man, just chill. But well, all right. So last question, because I know we care about the families. We care about a lot of people that are listening to our podcast or watching are the loved ones of addicts. And so help us identify what are some potential red flags, some areas of caution if they're thinking, hey, maybe I have a loved one who is dealing with a process addiction.
Ugh, those are hard, right?
Yes.
You don't see them.
Yeah.
I mean, gambling you could probably see because you're going to notice finances, right? Unless you have if you have shared accounts, you might see it. If you have separate accounts, you may not notice it as fast. Like intimacy disorder is hard. Like it's not something you can see. It's not like use where you
Right.
just see it.
Right.
But there are going to be things, right? Like you're going to notice maybe they're not around as much, or there's always an excuse, or they're missing things, or the lies. They're going to lie. They're going to catch them in something, right? They're not going to be telling the truth about something, and there's probably going to be some kind of a cross addiction associated with it that maybe
Increased
they picked
alcohol.
up something. Yeah, so there's going to be an increase to something that you're recognizing, and maybe some shame associated with that. So you're going to recognize that. So some like withdrawal from them.
Yeah.
Not being honest with the kids. Maybe they're a little bit more bitier than they were before, so they're not like themselves.
Do you ever tell the loved ones to listen to their gut, or is that a
Yes.
bad idea? Okay, that is a good idea. Because so many times I've heard people say, "Oh, I felt something was off," or something.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So I'm like, when did you feel like something was wrong? And then when you confronted them, how did they react? That reaction is going
Typically,
to
it's
tell
gonna
you
be-
a whole lot.
If they're
right?
gaslighting you,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the
Listen.
gaslighting is a whole thing
Listen to
involved in
that,
all
yeah.
this. And then you can, like there's never a time for a woman to be an investigator, right? And you don't want your wife to be your investigator, but chances are like that's usually what strikes it, right? They start looking into things, right? Like where were you? Like what does the phone bill say? What do the finances say? That's usually how things get picked up or caught. If you have like adult children or older teenage kids, they're smart. They'll probably follow you and find you. Yeah,
And the people close to you just usually
They
they have a
know.
hunch, like something's not quite right.
they
here.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And someone will rat you out. Like there's probably somebody that you told, although sometimes these guys keep it completely hidden in a secret. So
Yeah.
maybe they haven't told a soul.
Master of disguise. And, yeah.
Yep. And that happens a lot. So sometimes these guys finally just get tired of hiding and come out. I don't know, Dan, what are your
I mean,
thoughts?
yeah,
I think I hit it.
addicts wear so many masks. If follow your gut in things. I've said this to Jill before, and if we would put all of the unsolved cases, all the cold cases in front of a betrayed partner, they would be able to solve those unsolved crimes. If we told them that at the end of finding that unsolved crime, you get to know the answers to your husband's infidelity, they would be solved in 3 days. There's nobody that is a better detective than a betrayed partner.
Oh, and it's not serving them.
And it's not serving them. That's the problem. It ends up causing them even more harm and more trauma. So anytime we talk with those spouses, it's like, okay, you're going to have this want to be the detective. Don't do it. Do not do it.
Unlink
Yes.
the iPad. Unlink the Mac.
Yes.
You don't need it linked.
You don't want it.
Right.
Turn it off. Don't
because-
get in there.
Yeah, because you have to start doing your work also.
Right.
And finding that, so when you find that link to, okay, the infidelity, the gambling, the whatever addiction it is, having those hard conversations are really hard.
Yeah.
So having people that support that other person, and having people there to support you to talk to that other person, doing it in a neutral setting is really important too. Not doing it in your home, in the bedroom or in the kitchen or somewhere at your own house is really hard, because it's not a neutral place for either of you. Having those hard conversations, you both need support.
Yeah.
I guess that's why they do interventions and how they do it, how they do interventions. And I think that's so important, so that the addict can't feel attacked. They have to feel loved. And they're going to feel attacked, and they're not going to feel loved.
And it's hard to love somebody when you're so upset.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's hard to love somebody when you're so scared.
Yes.
And that's another side of it, right? Like they need to feel that love and they need to feel that care. And sometimes that comes across so sideways when
Yep.
somebody's
Right.
so mad,
Right.
so scared, so confused,
Right.
right? And when an addict is so defensive and
Yeah.
so on edge and so resistant.
Well, that's why that time apart sometimes is so helpful.
Well, most of the time, the spouse. I mean, if there's one consistent I hear from a spouse in my phone calls with them, it's I feel like our entire life has been a lie.
Yeah.
That's
Wrestling with that big time,
I
yeah.
probably hear that. I bet 95% of the spouses I talk to.
It's what I hear every Wednesday.
My life has been a lie, and there's some truth in that, but there's a lot of untruth in that as well.
It wasn't all a lie.
It wasn't all a lie. No. There are pieces of it, yes, that were lies. And there was a lot of pieces that were not.
Yeah.
You know, and being able to see that then from that 30,000 foot view of, okay. But in order to see it from that 30,000 foot view, they have to become healthy. Everybody
Yeah.
has to become healthy.
It takes
in that.
time,
It
doing
takes
your
time.
own work, yeah.
Yeah, it takes time. It takes support. It takes, the spouse getting to therapy groups and to support groups and to, all, Jill's group and having people that they can talk to be able to relate to. The worst thing I think a spouse can do is think they can do it on their own. As soon as they think they can do it on their own, they too are in trouble. Because the only way recovery can truly work is, I was telling this to a guy the other day, is anybody I hear that says I got it, they're done.
Yeah,
they're
it's scary.
done. But if they say we got it, okay, you're good. You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
We got it. Because they're going to be surrounding themselves with people and support and I feel the same way with the spouse. If she's going to say I got this, she's in trouble.
Yeah.
But if they say we got this, all right,
Takes a
you're going
team,
to
community.
you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
You're going to be okay. Whether the marriage survives or the relationship survives or not, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, y'all, thanks for doing this. I know you got a bunch of crazy jokers like me downstairs probably waiting outside your door for you, but full house right now. I love it.
We are
We are pretty full.
That's
Yeah.
great.
We
That's
are pretty
great.
full.
Well, thank you for the work you do and sharing on this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a big deal and definitely changing lives like mine. So I'm
Super
grateful.
excited for tonight.
Yeah. Got a great alumni meeting tonight. One of our guys coming in sharing his
Finally,
story.
yeah.
Finally got him in. Yeah, you gave me his name a long time ago, but he's got a good few years of sobriety now, so
Yeah.
that'll be fun.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
He's a real good guy.
All right, y'all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.